Hi students, I'm going to try to do a review on the integumentary system. If I get through this, you will know basically everything you need to know almost on your lab practical and your exam. So let's get started. So what exactly is the integumentary system? That includes the skin. The skin is the largest organ of your body, and all those structures that are associated with the skin, like your oil glands, your sweat glands, your hair, nail, and those all important sensory receptors that help us feel our way through life. So let's see what it is. So we're going to be starting with, see if I can do this, with our epidermis. Epidermis is the top layer of our skin. Epi meaning on top of. On top of what? On top of the dermis. So it's the top layer. And what is the epidermis? You just learned this. This is epithelium. What kind of epithelium? This is stratified, squamous, keratinized. These cells are dead. So we'll talk about why they're called, it's keratinized, but just know this is stratified, squamous, keratinized epithelium. That is your epidermis. Below the epidermis is going to be your connective tissue layer, and this is your dermis. There's two parts of the dermis that we'll get to, but epidermis, dermis, and what's below the dermis? The hypodermis. Hypodermis, aka the subcutaneous layer, aka the sub-Q layer. Once you get into adipose tissue, fat down here, you are in the hypodermis or the sub-Q. So, oops, already screwing up here. So, just a quick review. What's the difference between stratified squamous non-keratinized versus stratified squamous keratinized? Non-keratinized, this is stratified squamous, yes. Top cells, they're flat, the nuclei are flat. These cells are alive. These top cells are alive, right? Here's your lumen. So these cells are alive. These cells, great color of the pen. Let me see if I can get pen color, just stay green. These cells are dead. So no nuclei here at all, no nuclei. So this is keratinized. So that's basically what you need to know. These cells are alive. If they're non-keratinized on the top, these cells are DEAD. So let's look at the cells. You have to know these two. The cells of your epidermis. Make sure you have your lab worksheets out with you so you can be following along on your lab worksheet too. So here, this is showing you a drawing of your epidermis. So here is the epidermis right here. And here is going to be the connective tissue layer. Here is your basement membrane going around. Oops. Yowzers. There's your basement membrane. So this is all your connective tissue layer here. So we have the cells of the epidermis. We're going to start with the keratinocytes. Keratinocytes. These cells, remember cyte means cells. Keratin tells you, wow, something to do with keratin. These cells are making keratin. What is keratin? Keratin is a tough protein. A tough protein that is made by the keratinocytes, and it's going to give our skin it's not waterproof, it's water resistant coating, and it's going to give us some protection up here. So this is all cells that have been filled with keratin up here. But let's talk about how that happens. So down at this first layer at the bottom, you're going to have to know these layers too. There's this word stratum. You're going to see stratum all through here. All these layers, stratum. Stratum just means layer. So stratum layer, which layer? The basal layer. Stratum basale is your basal layer. It's connected to your connective tissue layer. This is almost all keratinocytes. We have some other cells down here too. Keratinocytes are 90% of all the cells of the epidermis. Remember, this is epithelium. One of the characteristics of epithelium is rapid regeneration, a high mitotic rate. So this is showing you a keratinocyte and actual mitosis right here. So these cells are dividing really quickly. In fact, these cells, sending up their daughter cells all the way up to the top here, this whole process of making skin and the skin sloughing off and dying, you get a whole new layer of skin about every 4 weeks. So these keratinocytes rapidly dividing, sending up their daughter cells into the next layer. But we also have another cell down here, a melanocyte. Melanocytes make a pigment called melanin. So this is going to give our skin its color. Now, it doesn't matter if you're of Irish descent or African American descent, you still have essentially the same amount of melanocytes. What's different is the amount of melanin they produce. And we'll talk about why this melanin is protective, what's going on. I have another picture for you of that. But these melanocytes sit down here in the stratum basale. They're making their pigment. And they're also, you're going to find melanocytes in this next layer up too. And another layer, another cell you're going to find in the stratum basale are these sensory receptors. This is called a Merkel cell. A Merkel, aka tactile cell, right here. Oh, here he is. Merkel or tactile cell. These are sensory receptors for touch. Tactile means touch. We're talking about you can feel the difference between something smooth, rough. You can feel its texture. You can tell if it's rounded, cubed. You can tell its shape. You're getting all that sensation, a lot of that sensation from these Merkel cells that are in the stratum basale. They are connected to a structure in the dermis. It's called a tactile or Merkel Disk. This disc is actually cupping this Merkel cell, and it's sending the information down this sensory nerve. And this is going to be going to your brain so it can interpret that sensation. So the Merkel cell, if you touch something up here, oops, where am I? If you touch something up here, it's going to send that sensation down, and it's going to trigger the Merkel cell to send a sensation down to the Merkel disc and send it through a nerve to your brain. So those are the 3 cells that you're going to find down the stratum basale: keratinocytes, the Merkel, aka tactile cells, and melanocytes. Then we get to the second layer, stratum spinosum. So spinosum, because in between these daughter keratinocytes, remember all these are daughter cells coming down from the stratum basale. They're dividing, sending their daughters up into this next layer. The stratum spinosum, there's these little spine bridges that you can see connecting the keratinocytes. So since it looks spiny, they're going to call it stratum spinosum. And in this layer, you have some melanocytes too, because these cells are dividing. These keratinocytes are still dividing. So we're going to need some of the melanin pigment for these daughter cells too, and we'll talk about that pigment a little bit later. But you're also going to have this cell in here. It's a Langerhans cell, aka epidermal dendritic cell. Nobody calls it that. Everybody calls it a Langerhans cell, named after a German scientist that discovered it. Langerhans cell. In fact, Merkel is German. A German scientist discovered that one too. But anyway, Langerhans cells sit in the stratum spinosum. These are phagocytes. So these phagocytes are part of your immune system. So they are there to help protect you if any foreign invaders penetrate your skin and they get into the stratum spinosum. We're going to have these Langerhans cells in there to help fight off that infection or that invasion of those invaders coming in. So Langerhans cells, part of your immune system. So we got your keratinocytes down here, rapidly dividing, sending their daughter cells into the stratum spinosum. Now we call these cells keratinocytes because they are actively making the protein keratin. And in this layer, the stratum granulosum, those granules, those little dots that you see in the keratinocytes, that is keratin. So what's happening is the cytoplasm of these keratinocytes is filling up with that protein keratin. So they're filling up their cytoplasm with keratin. The other organelles have no room. The cell can no longer function. So these cells, these keratinocytes, start dying. They are dying. So stratum basale, the cells are alive. Stratum spinosum, the cells are alive. Stratum granulosum, they're starting to die. They're not dead yet, but they're starting to die. Now, this next layer, so that's your third layer. The next layer is the stratum lucidum, but you will only have this layer, stratum lucidum, in thick skin. When we say thick skin, we are talking about the palms of your hand and the bottom of your feet. So remember that on any exam, where do you find stratum lucidum? Only on the palms of your hand and the bottom of your feet. Every other place on your body, you do not have stratum lucidum. Okay, so these cells are dead. D-E-A-D. No nuclei here. These are just keratinocytes. They've been filled up with keratin. They're dead. Same thing with the next layer up, the top layer. Stratum corneum. Stratum corneum, these are dead cells. So dead, dead, dying, alive, alive. So make sure you know where these cells, you need to know where these cells are found, what stratum you're going to find them in, what their function is. I think that's about it. Yeah, it's a lot for one slide, huh? So let's doop. So now what you're going to need to do on the microscope, you're going to get a skin slide and you're going to find the stratum. So this is your connective tissue layer right here. This is your basement membrane is going to be somewhere, or well, I cannot draw very well. It's going to be your basement membrane here. You just follow it around. You can see the difference between the epidermis and the dermis, right? So remember, this is your epidermis, right? Your stratified squamous keratinized. So the stratum basale is how many layers thick? 1 layer thick. So basically, it's just this bottom layer of cells down here. Probably not going to be able to see it distinctly under a microscope, but just know it's 1 layer thick. Ooh, oh my gosh, what happened? Whoa. Whoa, I pushed a button. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, lost my drawing. So, anyway, you know where the stratum, you know where your basement membrane is, right? Basement membrane kind of around here. Stratum basale, stratum spinosum is this big layer here. So remember, stratum spinosum is where you have all the daughter keratinocytes. You got Langerhans cells in there too, maybe a few melanocytes in here too. How do you know this is stratum spinosum? Because, well, it's right above the stratum basale. And once you get to this darkened area up here, you're going to see actual granules in these keratinocytes. So then you know you are in this. This is like the stratum granulosum. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I don't know what's going on. I need to go to bed, but anyway, so we are in the stratum granulosum right here. So you can easily see the stratum granulosum, right? Easy weasy. Now, I am not going to ask you to ever identify a stratum lucidum. Number one, even if it's there, it's hard to differentiate stratum lucidum from stratum corneum. But if it's thick skin, it's going to be there, stratum corneum. Every skin slide is going to have stratum corneum. Depending where it's from, it could be really thick stratum corneum or thin. Oh my gosh. So here's another slide. This is a typical slide that you're going to see on any lab practical. Easy to see. Here is your connective tissue layer. Here is going to be stratum basale, stratum spinosum. Once you get to this darkened area where you see granules, this dark purple area up here, stratum granulosum, yes, and then this is going to be stratum corneum. There's probably stratum lucidum in here too, but I won't ask you. And just looking down here, what kind of connective tissue is down here? This is going to be in the deeper area of your dermis. What kind of connective tissue is that? Remember, this is dense, irregular connective tissue. Underneath all epithelial tissue is what kind of connective tissue? So this area is going to be a realer connective tissue. That was just a little review. Another good slide. So here you can see the stratum basale pretty clear down here. And you can actually see some dark melanin. This is just like pigment, this dark brown pigment. So stratum basale, stratum spinosum, then you get to the granular layer. You know you are in stratum granulosum, and then stratum corneum. Pretty easy once you see it multiple times. So what is the pointer pointing at? So on a lab practical, what layer is this? This is stratum. See all the granules? Stratum granulosum. What layer is this? Stratum spinosum. What layer is this? Stratum corneum. Now this, you can see the stratum corneum here. It's real thin. So this is going to be from thin skin. But what's interesting about this slide is you see lots of dark brown pigment. So there is a lot of melanin down here. So those melanocytes are making lots of melanin. So we can probably assume this color of this skin is going to be a darker color because of all this pigment down here. So that's made pigment from the melanocytes. So I just wanted to show you, here's a picture of a melanocyte. They got these long cytoplasmic extensions that are coming out, and these cytoplasmic extensions are filled with the pigment, melanin pigment, and they're going to exocytose, cleave off of that pigment, and they're going to put that pigment into the cell of the keratinocytes. Now, why do we want to do that? We are going to add a layer of pigment over our keratinocytes, over the nucleus of the keratinocytes. That's where the keratinocytes want that melanin. Why? Well, these cells are actively dividing, right? So when they're actively dividing and their DNA is exposed and you get UV radiation coming down through the skin and bombarding those actively dividing cells with their chromosomes exposed, you can get mutations of the DNA. You can get skin cancer that way, and that's what happens. So we are trying to protect these rapidly dividing keratinocytes from the UV radiation that causes skin cancers. So that is the purpose of all of this melanin, and when you decide you want to go get a tan, not a smart thing to do, your body is starting to produce, those melanocytes are saying, okay, I got to protect you, I'm going to make more pigment to protect your DNA, but please stay out of the sun because this is not good for you. So hopefully you understand why we have this pigment. We're just putting sunglasses, like little sunglasses, over all the nuclei of our keratinocytes to protect them from UV radiation. So this is just a review of all the different layers. Make sure you go through all these layers. I got a good your lecture notes go through all this too. So make sure you go through them before you go down into the dermis. Make sure you have the epidermis, your stratified squamous keratinized layer down packed and you understand it. The other thing I want to point out too here, there's going to be a term. So here is our epidermis, right? Here is our stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. This is our epidermis, and you see how this bottom layer that is going up and down, up and down, up and down. These are called your epidermal ridges. And depending where you are in your skin, you're going to have more of them. Some skin isn't going to have as many epidermal ridges like this. This is giving us more surface area. Yes, more surface area, real important in anatomy. So when we have more epidermal ridges, there's going to be more contact with the connective tissue layer below the dermis down here, and it's going to have these dermal papilla. This is papillae is plural, but a papilla, let's see where if I can write it, a papilla singular is a nipple. So anytime, and you're going to see that in anatomy a lot this semester, if it says it's a papilla, it's a nipple-looking structure. So do you see all these little nipple-looking structures? Yes. So these are dermal papillae. Papillae are fitting right in here, in between these epidermal ridges. So more surface area, and you're going to have lots of this surface area mostly on your fingers, because there's going to be sensory structures right under here. They're going to help pick up sensation. So we want lots of sensation in our fingertips, and we want lots of surface area for a good contact with the epidermis to the dermis, because there's going to be lots of friction on your fingers too. You rub them together, you don't want this layer to lift off or separate. So another reason why you got lots of surface area in your fingertips. And this is what it looks like. These are the epidermal ridges on your fingertips. That's what you're seeing. And these are all the sweat pores, where all the sweat's coming out onto your fingertips. So pretty cool, huh? That is very cool. So we're in the dermis now. So we said these were the epidermal ridges, right? And this was the papillary papilla right here, sticking up, right? This papilla going up. So we are going to call this area of the dermis the papillary region of the dermis. This is the papillary region of the dermis. So the papillary region is this top about 20% of the dermis. Not a lot of it, but the papillary region of the dermis. What kind of connective tissue is underneath all epithelial tissue? Areolar connective tissue. So what do you need to know? You need to know this is the papillary region of the dermis, and the connective tissue of the papillary region is areolar connective tissue. Deep to the papillary region, about 80% of the dermis is going to be the reticular layer of the dermis. Don't ask me why it's called reticular layer. It does not have reticular fibers. This is all basically collagen fibers and some elastic fibers in here, but they call it the reticular layer of the dermis, and this is dense, irregular connective tissue. So just a recap on here. By now you should know Stratum Basale, Stratum Spinosum, Stratum Granulosum. Here they're showing you Stratum Lucidum, only found where? Only have Stratum Lucidum in thick skin, and here's Stratum Corneum. So can you name all these layers? So what is this bottom layer? I'll tell you, this is thick skin. This is thick skin. So there's going to be 5 layers in this one. What's the bottom layer? What's this bottom layer? Say it out loud. Stratum Basale, yes. What's this layer here? Stratum Spinosum. What's this layer here? With all the granules, Stratum Granulosum. Here's a clear looking layer, so this is Stratum Lucidum. Lucid means clear. And then the top layer is Stratum Corneum. So what I think I'll do here, I'm going to stop this video at this point, because I think I've talked too long on this one, and I'll just make another video and we'll complete the integumentary system on video 2.